Welcome back. We will have that song for you a bit later on, but joining me in studio for this conversation is one psychologist, Zakiah Rashid, who's a counselor, psychologist, and also a VCT counselor. We want you to interact with us, of course, on 22162. That's our SMS line. Start with the word circuit. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at eCircuit Y254. Welcome to the conversation. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Christine.
Yes.
Appreciate it. And I'm happy to be here today.
Yes. So today we are talking about an issue that, of course, has been talked about over and over and over again. But, you know, we can never overemphasize about it. We can never talk enough about it. But just to, you know, make people understand what is rape.
Okay. In very simple way of explaining rape, it is basically the sexual intercourse without mutual consent between two individuals, or at least maybe you can say even more depending on how it happens.
Yes.
But we say without mutual, a sexual activity or sexual act without mutual consent between individuals.
All right, so we are talking about consent. How do you differentiate that this is a rape case, this is not a rape case? What constitutes consent?
Consent can be written or verbal. But when you are talking about consent, it's basically the permission to participate in that particular act. So permission comes in, we are interacting and we know basically what is following next, that we are going to have a sexual intercourse. And I agree to that and the other party agrees to that. That is what we say. Consent or permission. So when you talk about consent, we are saying basically it could be just a verbal permission to participate in that particular act. So when you are talking about rape, there is no permission. An individual just decides, one individual decides to go for it without the permission of the other individual.
So of course it could be either way, men, women.
Exactly. Yes. When you are talking about rape does not mean that it is just one particular gender or sex. Rape can happen to men, rape can happen to women, contrary to what people think, that is just women who get raped. No, it is both ways. Yes.
All right, so then why do people rape? What really goes through the mind of a rapist? For what reasons do they do the heinous act?
Okay, now we say that there are various factors that contribute to an individual, do or participate in the act of rape. So we are talking about the characteristics that, constitutes, this particular act. Why do people rape? Yes. Let me put it that way. Why do people rape? So we say that in this area of psychology, we say that we are looking at several factors. One of them is psychological factor. Now, when we talk about psychological factor, we talk about how people think, how people rationalize situations. So we say that psychologically, some individuals are not in a position to think rationally. And they think that by raping an individual, they actually portray their either masculinity, we can maybe use that, masculinity, that the being me, I am doing this and it's the only way that individual can know that I exist, I'm around and I can do it. So that is the psychological, the psychological part of it. And we go to personality part of it, that some individuals have been wired or to think that the only way that they can do things is by using force, and they even derive pleasure in doing that. They derive pleasure in seeing other individual getting hurt. So because when you are raping an individual, there is that aspect of hurting. An individual may scream and an individual may make noise and an individual may seek for help, so that actually makes them feel good. So it is feel good in quotes, because it is not a situation where an individual should feel good. But we say that their personality is also distorted. So they derive pleasure. Sometimes we even call them sadists. They derive pleasure in seeing other people. And you see that in rape, some individuals just don't go ahead and rape. They'll actually commit other heinous acts before they rape. So some of them will beat individuals. Some of them will, shove them, will push them, will, do all sorts of things before they even rape them. And that's why you'll hear cases, some individuals say an individual was raped, then strangled, or even strangled to near death and then raped. So you, in your mind, or in our mind, we ask ourselves, Why should they do that? If they wanted to, do this particular act, why don't they do it directly? But this is as we think of it that way because we are okay. We look in your mind and we think rationally. But this individual is not okay in the mind, and that's why they derive this pleasure in committing all these acts put together before they even go to the act of rape itself. And then cultural factors. Cultural factors is where in some cultures, even in our own country, some cultures actually make it look like, there's no difference between rape and consented sex. So it is like you cannot even go and explain to someone that I've been raped. They look at you and say, it is just sex. So what are you talking about? And we say, no, there's a difference, because here we are talking about consent or permission or no permission. So some cultures look at it like a man has a right to go ahead and have sex in quotes, because it is not sex. It is a heinous act, because when it comes to shoving, pushing, pulling, pinching and doing all that, then it does not amount to consented sex. So culture sometimes will make it look like it is our right. It is some individuals' right to do that, and we say no. And then we go to now where we are seated in here, the media. And we say sometimes the media, and I'm using the word sometimes, that the media, the way they portray, a girl child, a lady, like an object of sex. In some people's mind, those people who are sick, are mentally sick, they will not take it the way it has been portrayed. They will misinterpret it. So they look at any other girl like a sex, object, and that way they even take it further, and now go ahead and commit the act. So we say sometimes the adverts that we see, and we ask ourselves, why don't we see men in this advert? Why don't we see men, and most of the time, this girl child is portrayed, almost three quarters naked. Only a quarter is clothed. So we say, if we can change this and make it, that even a man can participate in an advert and have that product sold, it doesn't have to be a lady. Why a lady? What are we trying to bring forward? Is it that men cannot sell products? Is it that men cannot be there and sell the, make the products, get sold? So we are saying that something is not right in the way we portray it. And we don't just say Kenyans, just here in Kenya. We say worldwide, the way we've turned things around, and that every other advert is followed by a three-quarter, not dressed lady, a three-quarters naked lady. So we say sometimes it contributes to that. So we are talking about psychological factors, we are talking about personality factors, we are talking about cultural factors, and we are talking about the media and the way they portray, issues to do with sex.
All right. Now, some statistics, of course, some studies have shown that most individuals experience physical, or rather rape, from an intimate partner in their life. There's you can be raped by a stranger, but you can also be raped by people that is this true? That most people
it is very true. It is very true, and statistics are actually telling us that up to 60% of the rapes are actually by individuals who are well known by the victim. The victim knows them, and that's why it becomes so difficult to talk about it, because in most cases where a known individual is involved, there are threats that accompany that kind of an act. So if this particular victim is not able to come out and talk about it, because there's a person you see every other day, how do you go and report a person that you'll see next to? And when you're talking about the knowledge, in most cases they are even relatives. So sometimes again culture comes in and it's shoved down the under the carpet that this is so and so, this is your uncle. How do you talk about it? This is an abomination. You cannot talk about your uncle in this manner. And some individual go ahead and even say, no, this person cannot do this. You are just bringing it out. It's not true. So you can imagine how the victim feels when this is a person they know. They could talk about it, but it may be culture and all these other things come in and say you cannot talk about it. Yet it's very true that most of the rape cases are done by the individuals that are well known, and in most cases even relatives.
All right. Are there like specific characteristics or specific ways in which rape victims behave? In the recent cases, like for example in Kenya, we have seen the lady say that it happened a long time ago, but I was not able to come forward and express myself and say it. As a relative, as a friend, are there things that you can see in a person and be able to tell that this person is going through this?
Yes. Now we say that we characterize these characteristics into forms. We say there are acute characteristics that you may see, and there are chronic characteristics. Now, in acute characteristics, we say that maybe this particular act has taken place very recently. And some of these characteristics, we may say that individuals may be develop this fear and anxiety, and this fear and anxiety may come in that somebody walks in, for example, in the house, and somebody get a little bit startled because who is this? They are imagining it could be the very same person. These individuals may develop, paranoia. That paranoia is that situation where you get, develop that fear of almost everyone, including yourself. You don't trust anyone except yourself, because you see every other person as the culprit, as the perpetrator. This individual may have problems with sleep, so they get to have sleep disturbances. For children, later on, they may even go through what we call regression, that they go back to their old self during their development stages, when they've been maybe performing some acts like finger sucking. They may start bedwetting, simply because they're trying to run away from this. So for the children, this is very common, that you see a child portraying such characteristics, then you start, probing and seeing whether an act of sexual activity took place. You may see that individuals may isolate themselves, even for grown-ups. Maybe this person was, a very jovial person, all over the place, doing their thing, but all of a sudden they just hold back. They cannot interact with friends. In the house, they may lock themselves in most of the time. They may go to work, but from work they just come home and lock themselves in. Then these are some of the things that we look at. Now, when we go to chronic characteristics, we may have an individual going now into depression. We may have individuals now have troubled relationships. They have relationships that they cannot hold. We may have individuals who now have typical insomnia that has set in. They cannot sleep. They cannot sleep, and it becomes almost their way of life. And now these are the areas that we start probing and asking what is going on, especially in relationships where you see people have gone on, they've gotten married, but somewhere along the line the relationship doesn't just hold. And sometimes these things may come in